if you're looking for a way to make some extra money and you watch every UFC event live, you should seriously consider joining my live betting group, because we make a profit in 73% a month. Not only that, but the downside is very minimal. If you take a look at my profit chart from over the last 10 years, you can see that our dips are very, very minor. In fact, our largest ever downswing was just minus 14 units, which in the bigger picture is absolutely nothing. And we win on the vast majority of UFC events. So I don't know about you, but in this day and age where everything is super expensive, I'm always looking for ways to maximize my time. And a lot of the time I'll feel guilty if I watch TV or I play video games or I watch sport and I'm not earning money. So the live betting group is a really good way for you to do something you love, watch the UFC, whilst also earning money doing it. Because like I say, we make a profit in 73% a month. So if you watch every UFC event live, it's an absolute no-brainer to join my group. You essentially get paid to watch the sport you love. And what's even better is that it doesn't even have to ruin your viewing experience now. In the past, the way that I would broadcast my live betting tips would be through an audio stream, and a lot of the time people in my live betting group would be 20, 30, 40 seconds behind my broadcast on the stream they were watching, which meant it kind of ruined watching the fight for them and ruined their enjoyment of the UFC because they got spoilers, right? I would say, you know, Alexander Volkanovski's been knocked out, and then they wouldn't see the knockout for 30, 40 seconds on their stream. We solved that problem, and we've now got a notification system where you don't even need to listen to my audio stream or my commentary. You can just, you know, have your phone open and receive an audio notification as soon as I recommend a bet with all the details of the bet, so you can enjoy the fight. You don't have to listen to my commentary, you don't have to listen to any audio stream, and you can still make money on 73% a month in the year. Vast majority of UFC events make a profit almost every week, and you don't have to worry about your spoilers, your viewing experience being ruined, and you can make a lot of money live betting with me. The group is capped at 65 people, just so that, you know, we don't have tons of people trying to bet the same thing at the same time, because you know that would destroy your odds and lead to odds getting suspended. So we keep the group small. That enables you to get in on the vast majority of bets and enjoy the kind of profits that you see in this superb profitability chart, which I'm very confident we will continue to keep grinding up for another 10 years. So seriously, give it a try. A lot of you watch this video, you've never given it a try, but you watch the UFC live. If you watch the UFC live, this is an absolute no-brainer. It's like putting gas in your car. It's something you should definitely be doing. You gotta put gas in your car if you want to drive. You should be in my live betting group if you watch the UFC live. It's a no-brainer. The membership fees pay for themselves. You can earn a lot of money from it from a very modest unit size. So go to my website, check it out. There's a bunch of information on there. Link in the description below. We've got some fights to break down from UFC 325, which we haven't broken down yet. So we've done the majority of the main card, but I intentionally left out Tai Tuivasa versus Tallison Teixeira because I do think that Tai Tuivasa is a very good bet this weekend. And in this breakdown, I'm going to explain the reasons why. Now, Tallison Teixeira fought Derek Lewis in his last fight. He was knocked out in 35 seconds. It was a little bit of a controversial stoppage, but at the end of the day, a win is a win, and Lewis got that win. And for those of you that have been watching my breakdowns for a while, you will know that 6 months ago, when Derek Lewis fought Tallison Teixeira, as you can see it, I recommended a bet on Derek Lewis at very nice underdog odds for the exact same reason that I'm going to be betting on Tai Tuivasa at very nice underdog odds. And I'm kind of shocked that the betting market is still capping Teixeira as a pretty big favourite in this fight based on him getting knocked out against a very similar style against Derek Lewis. And so if you go back and watch this breakdown from 6 months ago where I explained the reasons why we were betting on Lewis at underdog odds, I will show you. You can see in that video, I played video footage to justify the bet on Lewis. He came through for us. I'll play the exact same footage to justify the bet on Tuivasa. And this is not me saying I think Tuivasa will win. Just like if you go back, watch that breakdown, I wasn't saying Derek Lewis would win. But it's an absolute no-brainer to bet Tuivasa in this fight because he provides us with an excellent risk-to-reward ratio. So if we take a look at his odds, he's a 3.53 underdog, which is a plus 253 underdog for an implied probability of 28%, compared to Tallison Teixeira, who's a 1.30 favourite, minus 332 for an implied probability of 77%. And so if you just let the odds do the work for you on this one, you know, I think it's more than reasonable to give Tai Tuivasa a 35 to 40% chance of winning this fight, which is a very, very good margin of value over the bookies, an extremely good margin of value over the bookies. To get any value on Teixeira at all, you'd have to give him a better than 80% chance of winning, which is absolutely absurd in a heavyweight fight against a guy that hits as hard as Tuivasa, especially when you take into consideration the footage that I'm going to show you shortly. But before we get into that, we're going to work through the fighter comparison tool. We're going to talk about how they match up when it comes to striking and grappling, and I'm going to explain the reasons why Tuivasa is a great value bet at these odds, and why I personally give him a 40 to 50% chance of winning this fight, which, like I say, gives us a great margin of value over the bookies. So if we take a look at the fighter comparison tool, and again, if you do join my website, or you're already a member of my website, and you want to use this tool, it's very useful. It saves a lot of time on research. Just go to the nav bar of any page, go to tools, and you can see UFC research tool here. Join my website, you can use it. So, Tallison Teixeira is 6 years younger, but Tuivasa is also kind of young for a heavyweight, so age is a bit of a nothing burger in this one. What isn't a nothing burger, though, is size, and Teixeira has a huge size advantage over Tuivasa. 5-inch height advantage, 8-inch reach advantage. We don't know what Tuivasa's leg reach is, but I can only imagine Tallison has got a reach advantage there too, and the size difference is enormous. There's just no getting around it. And so if we bring up the face-off from the stare downs today, just going to get it up for you now, you can see here firsthand that the size difference between these two is absolutely huge. You can see Tallison Teixeira towers over Tuivasa, which will make it a lot harder for Tuivasa to land the knockout shot. And there's the size difference. So you guys already know me. If you're coming to my channel and you want me to sugarcoat things and tell you everything's going to be okay and bet this guy he's an absolute lock, you're not going to get that type of breakdown and analysis here. I'm a realist. That size difference, it isn't good for Tai. But when you're betting fighters in this odds range at an implied probability of 28%, you've got to accept that there are going to be major risk factors, and the fighter that you're betting is more than likely going to lose. But if you just hit a 35% win rate on bets in this odds range over the long term, you're going to make a profit. And so we made a good profit betting Derek Lewis to beat Tallison. We're already free rolling on this one. Hopefully Tai can come through for us. If not, it doesn't change the fact that it's a good value bet. Now if we take a look at the significant strikes statistics and the takedown defense and all those kind of statistics, the stats aren't very useful on this one, because if we look at Tallison's record, he's only fought 3 times in the UFC, and none of those fights have ended very quickly. And so as a result, the stats aren't that meaningful on this one, because they've come from, you know, very extreme circumstances in fights that haven't lasted very long. So the stats don't really mean a whole lot when it comes to striking. And to be honest with you, the stats don't mean a lot when it comes to grappling either, because we haven't seen any grappling from Tallison in the UFC. Therefore, he hasn't got any stats yet. And I think the 58% takedown defense for Tuivasa actually paints him in a better light than what the reality is, because we all know his takedown defense is absurdly bad, and as a result, that doesn't really paint how bad his takedown defense is, in my opinion. So we'll get into the grappling in a minute. Now, if we take a look at the strike distribution chart, again, Tallison's striking stats aren't very useful. You can see he's only thrown 40 strikes in the UFC. But for Tuivasa, his stats are useful because they show that Tuivasa does attack the legs a lot, and we know Tuivasa's got very nasty leg kicks. He can inflict big damage with his leg kicks, which is one of the reasons why I like him in this fight, because obviously Tallison Teixeira at 6'7" is abnormally long and tall for the division, and so his legs are going to be very, very vulnerable to the leg kicks of Tuivasa, and Tuivasa can do a lot of damage with those leg kicks, attacking those skinny legs, especially because it'll be harder for Tuivasa to get inside that long reach with his boxing. So the only other thing to really speak about before we get into how they match up stylistically is that Tuivasa is Australian, and this card is taking place in Sydney, so obviously Tuivasa will have home advantage on his side, which I think is a pretty big deal for this fight, because Tallison, you know, he's only had 9 pro fights, he's very inexperienced. Every single one of those fights has ended in round 1, so if this goes past round 1, we've got no idea how Tallison's cardio is going to hold up, and we don't know how he's going to deal with those crazy Aussie fans making it an intense and intimidating atmosphere for him on Saturday night, because we know they'll be right behind Tuivasa, and Tuivasa will feed off the energy of the crowd. And so I guess before we talk about how they match up when it comes to striking and grappling, the one final thing that I need to say is one huge edge that Tuivasa could have in this fight, it's unproven but it's very possible, is an edge in cardio. Despite Tuivasa's appearance, his cardio is very, very good for a heavyweight. We know he can fight at a decent pace for 3 rounds. He was involved in a very grueling, very grueling 3-round fight against Cyril Gane. We've seen him go to decisions in the past, grueling fight with Blagoy Ivanov. Tuivasa's cardio, very, very good for a heavyweight, whereas Tallison's never been past the first round. So for all we know, as long as Tuivasa can survive into round 2, Tallison might completely gas out of his mind and be, you know, totally helpless in there and unable to defend himself. And this is just another reason why Tuivasa is such a good bet at an implied probability of 28%. You know, Tallison Teixeira's got an implied probability of 80%, and we've never even seen him go into the second round, which makes these odds even more absurd. So obviously, you know, this fight is more than likely going to be a stand-up fight. If you look at Tallison's record, he does have 1 submission in his pro debut, but outside of that, pretty much all of his fights have taken place on the feet, and he's got very quick knockouts. And so with both these guys primarily being strikers, we're going to focus more on striking in this one, but obviously we've got to cover grappling, and it's no secret to anyone that a huge risk factor for betting Tuivasa in this fight is that his takedown defense and ground game is actually a joke. That 58% takedown defense stat is quite flattering for Tuivasa, because the reality is that his takedown defense and ground game is awful. And even though we don't know anything about Tallison's grappling, I can only assume with his size and the part of the world that he's from, he's probably got a pretty big advantage on the ground. And so if he gets Tuivasa down, gets on top of him, Tuivasa's going to be in a lot of trouble. But like I said earlier in the breakdown, when you're betting guys at implied probabilities of 28%, you've got to expect some big risk factors. We're just playing the odds here and letting the odds do the work for us. And from my perspective, I'd much rather have a bet on someone like Tuivasa at odds of 3.53 when they've got a terrible ground game than bet on a guy like Tallison at odds of 1.30 when their cardio could be absolutely trash because they've never gone past the first round. Now, though, we're going to focus on the striking between these two, and this is where I think there's a lot of value on Tuivasa in this fight. So we know Tuivasa hits very hard, but not only does Tuivasa hit very hard, but he's also very tough and very durable. Yes, we've seen him get knocked out, you know, in the fight against Sergey Pavlovich. He was obviously knocked out, but outside of that, if you look at his record, he's fought some very heavy hitters, and hasn't been knocked out, right? So went the distance with Jairzinho Rosenstrike. We know Rosenstrike's got a lot of power. He didn't get finished until the third round against Cyril Gane. Took a lot of damage in that fight. You know, Derek Lewis didn't knock him out. Greg Hardy turned into a bit of a meme, but at one point in the UFC was very dangerous. He didn't manage to knock Tuivasa out. And so, you know, we've seen Tuivasa go up against all these heavy power punches, dangerous heavyweights. And his chin, for the most part, has held up pretty good. He's very tough, very durable, very comfortable in the exchange. When you look at the very brief amount of footage that we've got on Tallison Teixeira, and there's not much, because you can see this fight ended in 35 seconds, this fight ended in 35 seconds. What you notice when you watch Tallison Teixeira's past fights is that his striking defense is very, very bad. And this is one of the main reasons why we bet against him when he fought Derek Lewis, why we thought Derek Lewis was a very good bet. And all I'm going to do, just to show you how bad Tallison's striking defense is just play this 2-minute fight from the Contender Series. So I just want you to pay attention to how he doesn't move his head, you know, how he doesn't see the shots coming, and how he is a bit of a sitting duck to the knockout. So you can see here, you know, he's just kind of getting into this big exchange, and his opponent catches him with a clean right hook here. This was the fight that made me bet Derek Lewis against him. Watch, clean right hook lands there on the chin, and you can see, you know, it hurt him. His legs briefly went, and then he backs off a little. And just throughout this fight, you'll just see reckless exchanges where he gets dinged hard, and he just stands right in front of his opponent, doesn't move his head, chin up high and exposed, and is an absolute sitting duck to the knockout. And with how hard Tuivasa hits, I think it's very, very dangerous to fight in this way against someone like Tuivasa, and he fought like it against Derek Lewis and paid the price. Another thing you'll notice about Tallison in this fight is that, in my opinion, he doesn't use his length very well. He's got a huge reach advantage, and he's very tall. And like from this position, he does a good job of using his length when he's just touching you with a jab. But you'll notice in a minute, and at the beginning of this round, that far too often he kind of just fights guys in a phone booth and throws like winging hooks and doesn't use his length at all. So he like alternates between using his length reasonably well and then just getting really reckless and not using his length at all. And you'll kind of see there he eats a big right hand, there he eats a big left. And it's these sequences for me which are, you know, really selling me on a bet on Tuivasa, and they were the reason why we bet Derek Lewis to beat him. I mean, watch here, just misses that right hand by millimeters. And here you're thinking, you know, you're a long, tall guy, get on your bike, play the role of Matador, and use your length to just kind of back up and chip away at this guy, jab him to death. There's no need to risk getting knocked out by getting into huge exchanges. But what does he do? He stands his ground, almost eats a big left there, stands his ground, almost eats a huge right there, stands his ground, eats a clean left hand there. And you can just imagine, you know, eats a clean right hand there, and you can just imagine another huge right hand there. And you can just imagine, even with the reach differential, you know, you can just imagine Tai Tuivasa coming forward, walking Tallison down, giving him absolutely hell in exchanges like that. And we're going to play it in real time. It's only 10 seconds, but look at how vulnerable Tallison looks in this sequence. Look at this. Terrible striking defense. And, you know, when I was watching this, I couldn't believe that we were able to bet Derek Lewis a big underdog odds. I couldn't believe my eyes, because with how much power Lewis has got, only takes one of them shots to land clean and hard from Lewis, and Tallison's going to go down, and that's basically exactly what happened. And Tuivasa's more than capable of doing the same thing. You won't want to be eating clean, hard shots from Tai Tuivasa when he's wading forward. But look at how vulnerable he is here. Look at how vulnerable Tallison is. Look how vulnerable he is. Gets his gum shield knocked out. We'll just play it again in slow-mo. Sorry to milk it up, but just so you can kind of appreciate how bad this guy's striking defense is. You know, these shots are landing clean. They're landing clean. You know, And Tuivasa is going to be a lot more accurate than this Lopez guy. He's going to hit a lot harder as well. You know, these shots are either missing by millimeters or they're landing clean. Or they're just a little bit inaccurate from Lopez. Don't think, I mean, look at that, clean right hand. I don't think you want to be eating clean shots like that from Tuivasa. And so the ref puts his gum shield, oh, it's not Tallison's gum shield, apologies. But same principle applies, right? He's eating clean, hard shots. Looking very vulnerable on the feet. Notably here as well, look how slow this jab is. It's very slow. It looks like his hand speed is starting to slow and he's starting to get a little tired. But yeah, he's just gets the knockout. Very nice. Another quick win, but it's not going to be easy to stand in front of Tuivasa like that without getting yourself knocked out, because we know how durable Tuivasa is. So obviously this is only 35 seconds, but you can kind of see same sort of shit we saw in the Contender Series fight. Just kind of stood right in front of Lewis with his chin up high and exposed, hands down low. Gets dinged. Well, he kind of got dinged with a right hand first. Look, kind of gets dinged here. There's the warning shot. And then eats the left to put him down. And so, you know, we can debate the stoppage all we want, but at the end of the day, we've seen Tallison striking defense look less than optimum. And he paid the price on paper against Lewis. So, I think based on what we've seen, Tuivasa is an absolute no-brainer bet this weekend. And, yeah, it's risky. Tallison's got a big size advantage, probably a big advantage on the ground. But Tuivasa has got an advantage when it comes to cardio, toughness, durability, home advantage. And he's probably the better striker. And definitely has the power to knock Tallison out. So I think Tuivasa is a great value bet this weekend. Hopefully he can come through for us. Now we're going to break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Quillan Salkilld versus Jamie Mullarkey. So if you watch my videos every week, you'll know that I always say let the odds do the work for you. So in the case of Quillan Salkilld, I don't care if he's Captain America, Iron Man, the Incredible Hulk fighting Jamie Mullarkey this weekend. There's no way you can bet anyone at an implied probability of 91% in a cage fight to the death. Just doesn't make any sense. To get any margin of value at all, you'd have to give Salkilld a 95% chance of winning here, which is almost a statistical certainty, which we know in something as chaotic as a cage fight to the death, with injuries, sickness, disqualification, fight fixing, just impossible. So straight away, Salkilld is a total non-event, nothing burger. We're not going to focus on him because betting him is impossible. We're going to be mainly focusing on Jamie Mullarkey and whether he's worth a bet at an implied probability of 14%. So we will run through the odds. We'll give the odds to you. So Salkilld 1.11 favourite, which is minus 952. Implied probability of about 91%. Mullarkey 7.03 underdog plus 603. Implied probability of 14%. So whenever I research a fight and the odds are like this, before I even watch any footage at all, these odds are communicating to me that Salkilld has absolutely no way to lose this fight unless something crazy happens. What these odds mean is that Salkilld should be virtually indestructible, have cardio for days, and be significantly better in Jamie Mullarkey in every single aspect of MMA. If that's not the case, these odds don't make any fucking sense. And to be honest with you, after researching this fight, the odds don't make any fucking sense. Because when you take a look at footage on these two, I would say Salkilld is 20, maybe 30% better than Mullarkey everywhere. But does that really justify him being a 91% favourite in this fight? It really doesn't. And so if you're one of those guys that goes out and is very aggressive at betting any fight where you see a bit of value, Jamie Mullarkey is your guy this weekend, because the odds on this fight, quite frankly, are absurd. Salkilld does have the edge everywhere, but if you're letting the odds do the work for you, an implied probability of 91%, it's just ludicrous. I mean, not even Salkild's mum can justify betting him at those odds. It's ridiculous. The only person that should be talking about betting Salkilld in this odds range this weekend is a time traveller or someone that's got a crystal ball or can see into the future. Anybody else, you'd be a fool to even throw this guy into a parlay. And so, with that being said, with the way these two match up stylistically, I would expect Salkilld to win, but I think this fight's going to be far closer than the odds suggest. So let's take a look at the fighter comparison. They're about the same size, nothing too meaningful going on in terms of age. And if we look at the striking stats, obviously Salkilld, he's only had 2 fights in the UFC, and he did have 1 fight on the Contender Series, which does contribute to his stats. So don't have a huge sample size of data to work from with Salkild's stats. We've got something. So he throws about 25% more strikes per minute, is about 13% better when it comes to accuracy. Mullarkey is slightly better defensively. We can see that Salkilld is very aggressive with the takedown, shoots on average 8.41 takedowns per fight, which is super aggressive. Both guys have got good takedown defense, and Salkilld more aggressive at pursuing the submissions. Now, for some reason, Mullarkey's strike distribution data isn't loading, but you can see Salkilld also, in fact, I think Salkild's data is broken as well, as he's thrown far more strikes than this. So the strike distribution stats for these two is a little bit messed up for some reason, but everything else looks pretty much on the money to me. And so when we look at how good the takedown defense is from both these guys, and Salkilld is going to want to get the fight to the ground, what we've seen from Salkilld, particularly on the Contender Series fight, is that he does have a bit of a tendency to burn himself out when he can't get the fight to the ground, because he commits so much energy to his grappling, and when it's not effective, he just burns through energy and gets tired. Mullarkey does have good cardio. He does have reasonably good takedown defense. His striking defense isn't great. He does get dinged a lot, but Salkild's not a particularly dangerous striker. I know that he got the Hollywood knockout against Hakaras and sent him to the Shadow Realm, but outside of that, Salkilld isn't that dangerous of a striker, and that fight was a bit of an anomaly. And so, yeah, this is one of those fights, clear dog or pass. Salkild's a bit better than Mullarkey everywhere, slightly better when it comes to technical striking, more durable, probably a bit better defensively, even though the stats say otherwise. And better grappler than Mullarkey, but it might not matter because Mullarkey's very difficult to take down and hold down. So if Salkilld can't get Mullarkey down, it won't matter that he's the better grappler. So it's an interesting fight, definitely dog or pass. The odds on this one are absurd. It'll be interesting to see if Mullarkey can cause the upset, because, I mean, these odds offend me, quite frankly, because of how absurd they are. 1.11 minus 952. It's just ridiculous. Now I'm going to explain the reasons why I think Jonathan Micallef is a very good bet to beat Oban Elliott this weekend. And Micallef, while nothing is certain, is a safer bet in my opinion than taking Tai Tuivasa this weekend as a high-risk gamble. So I'm hoping Micallef at the very least may cover any potential loss that comes from Tuivasa. Fingers crossed. I'm not saying Micallef will definitely win, or he's going to win a super high percentage of the time, but I do think it'll be very difficult for Elliott to get his hand raised this weekend. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see Micallef is a slight favourite at average odds of around 1.74, which is going to be minus 136 for an implied probability of 58%. If we take a look at the odds on Oban Elliott, he's a 2.11 underdog, which is going to be plus 111 for an implied probability of 47%. So before we get into discussing how these two match up when it comes to striking and grappling, one of the main reasons why I think Micallef is a very good bet this weekend in the even money odds range is because he's got home advantage on his side, and in a fight like this, home advantage is absolutely huge. Mainly because these two guys are very well matched. I mean, you can see in the odds how well matched they are. They're both in the even money odds range. The implied probabilities are reasonably close. Now, we know home advantage is a pretty big deal, and Micallef is going to have those Australian fans right behind him on Saturday night. This means if any of the rounds tend to be reasonably close, the judges are more than likely going to swing in Micallef's favour. And so the only way in which Elliott is going to win this fight is if he finishes Micallef inside the distance, or if he wins 2 out of the 3 rounds reasonably dominantly to the point where the judges can't possibly screw him over. Now, if we take a look at his record, we can see that it's pretty unlikely he's going to finish Micallef inside the distance. Micallef's a tough, well-rounded fighter with no major weaknesses in his skill set. And we can see that Oban Elliott is a bit of a decisionator. He's not that dangerous, doesn't get many finishes. In fact, he only has 1 finish against Basil Hafez in his last 9 fights. So only 1 finish in his last 9. And many of those opponents that Elliott has failed to finish have been a far lower level than Micallef. So based on the fact that it's pretty damn unlikely Elliott would finish Micallef, in order for him to win, he has to go to Australia and beat an Australian in their backyard with home advantage and all the things that come with it. And I just think that's pretty unlikely. What's also worth noting is that Elliott significantly underperformed in his last fight against Shok Hyun Ko, and that fight took place in Baku, Azerbaijan. And if you look at the interviews and the social media posts from Elliott after that fight, he said that flying out to Azerbaijan, fighting somewhere like Azerbaijan, was something that kind of threw him off. He wasn't used to it. He was used to fighting in the UK and things like that. And so traveling to a strange country, different diet, cutting weight under different circumstances, all that kind of stuff, he found it very difficult. Now, Azerbaijan is only, I believe, around a 6 or 7 hour flight from where Elliott lives. In fact, Oban Elliott lives very close to me, about a 20-minute drive from my house in Wales. And obviously, he will have learnt a lot from going to Azerbaijan and cutting weight and all that sort of stuff, preparing to fight in a different country. He will have learnt a lot. He'll be better prepared in the future. However, he's now got to fly to Australia, which I believe is like a 30-hour flight, right? How long is the flight from the UK to Australia? It's a long one. I flew to Singapore and that was brutal. Okay, so a flight from UK to Australia takes 22 to 24 hours. How about Azerbaijan? No, I don't want to drive there. 5 to 6 hours, right? Yeah, so we were right. Okay, so on top of home advantage being in Micallef's favour, we already know Elliott underperformed flying 6 hours to fight in Azerbaijan. Now he's got to fly 22 to 24 hours to Australia, different time zone, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's another edge for Micallef. Micallef has fought in Australia pretty much his whole career, so nothing too different going on there. He'll have the crowd behind him. He'll have the judges on his side. There are lots of reasons to like Micallef before we even get into talking about how they match up from a stylistic point of view. Now, let's get into the fighter comparison tool. So it is worth noting that we will take a quick look at the stats on Micallef, but they're not that useful because he has only had 2 fights under the kind of UFC banner where stats are generated. The Contender Series fight only lasted 3 minutes, so we don't have good quality statistical data for Micallef yet. He hasn't had enough fights in the UFC, but we do have a bit for Elliott. Anyway, they are about the same age, but there are some very nice size advantages here for Micallef, which just add to the home advantage we already like about him. So he's got a 5-inch reach advantage, 3-inch leg reach advantage, which compounds together. And we saw in his UFC debut against Juicy that he does fight long and he uses that length pretty well. He's also a southpaw, which is a pretty big deal in this fight. He gave Juicy absolute hell from the southpaw stance, and I think he's likely to cause Oban Elliott big problems from the southpaw stance too. So he lands decent amount more strikes per minute. Elliott's a little bit more accurate, a little bit better defensively, but like we've already said, you know, it doesn't really matter a whole lot because we don't have enough fights to generate good quality data, and so the grappling stats are all a little bit pointless as well. In terms of the strike distribution, we can see that Micallef throws a lot of heavy, hard, impactful kicks to the body. Elliott mixes it up a little bit, but for the most part, they both mainly target the head. So we spoke earlier on about how southpaw would be a pretty big deal in this fight. I tell you what, let's quickly gloss over the grappling, and then we'll talk about the southpaw advantage for Micallef. So both these guys are primarily strikers. Obviously, we've seen Elliott mix things up a bit in his past fights. You know, you can see by the stats, shot 5 takedowns against Val Woodburn, 2 takedowns against Preston Parsons, 2 against Coe but was unsuccessful, 9 against Brito on the Contender Series. But based on past performances, Micallef is a strong guy that's pretty difficult to take down and hold down. When you take him down, he's quite scrambly, and Oban Elliott's not the most physically imposing grappler. Notably, what we learned about Oban Elliott in his last fight against Coe is that Elliott's actually pretty weak off his back, and we saw Coe take him down and hold him down pretty easily. Micallef has used some grappling in his past fights. You see him with some submission wins here. For the most part, he's a striker, but I'd say he's a more physically imposing fighter than Oban Elliott. Just the bigger man. They might be the same height, but Micallef definitely bigger, more physically imposing. So because we haven't seen a whole lot of Micallef's ground game at a decent level, it's tough to give him the advantage here. But with how weak Elliott looked off his back against Coe, I'm not too worried about the ground game for Micallef. I think this is more than likely going to be a stand-up fight. I think Elliott would struggle to implement a grappling heavy game plan here, especially because he runs the risk of losing a scramble, ending up on the bottom, and then being controlled for long periods like he did in his last fight against Coe, because Micallef is a big, strong guy, and if he gets on top of Elliott, Elliott's going to be in a fair amount of trouble. Now, in terms of how they match up when it comes to striking, do think the southpaw advantage is a pretty big deal in this one, because what we saw from Micallef in his UFC debut is that he throws devastating head kicks and body kicks from the southpaw stance. He inflicts a lot of damage with them, and Oban Elliott is someone that stands in a traditional boxing stance, in the orthodox stance, quite flat-footed, doesn't move around a whole lot, and will be a sitting duck to the kicking game of Micallef. Micallef does a really good job of using his length to hammer his opponents with his heavy kicking game, and I think this is something that Elliott is going to be particularly susceptible to. Micallef is a reasonably technical striker with hard, nasty, damaging power to go with it, and I really feel this is going to be one of those fights where Elliott could struggle big time on the feet. So when you look at how they match up in all areas, I don't see any advantage that Elliott has standing up or on the ground. Micallef's cardio looked good in his UFC debut. Therefore, with home advantage, the long travel time for Elliott, the size and reach advantage for Micallef, the fact that he lands damaging, hard, impactful shots, the fact Elliott is weak off his back, for me in the even money odds range, there are a lot of reasons to like Micallef in this fight, and that's why I will be betting him this weekend. So, if you like that breakdown, hit the like button below, and if this video gets 100 likes, I will do a bonus video where I break down all of the road to the UFC fights. We'll do all these ones. How many more have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fights we haven't broken down yet. So yeah, hit the like button below. If we get 100 likes, I will do a special road to the UFC video. And I actually do have 2 bets on these road to the UFC fights. So if you want to find out what those bets are, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com, link in the description below, and you can become a member and join the team. And if you go to the pre-fight betting section, you'll be able to see all my pre-fight bets for this card. Or you can hit the like button below, and as soon as this video gets 100 likes, I'll drop the bonus breakdown video for the road to the UFC fights. Already, like I said, got 2 bets for these road to the UFC fights. So if you want to see them, hit the like button below. As soon as we get 100 likes on this video, that bonus breakdown will drop. So have a great weekend. Hope you crush it. Hope you make loads of money. Hope you join my UFC live betting group, where you're guaranteed to make a decent profit almost every month of the year. But if you don't join, that's on you. And we will see you hopefully in that bonus breakdown. If not, see you next week.